August 29th, 1987. Inside a factory building in Yongin, South Korea, a scene was discovered that shocked the entire nation. Above the factory ceiling, inside a narrow dark space, 32 people were found dead. At first, no one could understand it. Why were they there? Why did no one come back out? And how had so many people ended up inside the same confined space? The case would later become known as the Odaeyang mass death incident. But even after the investigation ended, the questions never disappeared. That night, what really happened above that ceiling? At the center of the case was a woman named Park Sunja. At one time, she was known as a successful businesswoman. She founded a company called Odaeyang and expanded the business together with her employees. From the outside, she appeared to be an ordinary company executive. To some people, she even seemed like a philanthropist, someone helping those in need. And gradually people began gathering around her, those struggling financially, those who had lost direction in life, those searching for someone to rely on, and those hoping for a new beginning. Inside Odaeyang, they worked together and lived together. At first, it felt like a close community, but over time, the atmosphere slowly began to change. Park Sunja's influence grew stronger, and people began treating her words as something more than ordinary instructions. To some, she was a business leader, but to others, she became the center of everything. And from that point on, Odaeyang slowly began losing the appearance of a normal company. From the outside, it still looked like a workplace, but inside, something very different was beginning to grow. Quietly, that atmosphere began pulling people into a world that kept closing in. Life inside Odaeyang was reportedly very different from an ordinary company. Employees worked together and lived together. The line between work and daily life became increasingly blurred. At first, the structure may have felt comforting. For someone who felt alone, it became a sense of belonging. For someone struggling financially, it may have felt like a place to depend on. But over time, closed communities often become more controlled. People gradually distance themselves from the outside world. Some reports claimed family contact became less frequent. Others said members became cautious of outside attention. Problems were expected to stay inside, and slowly, even doubt became difficult to express. Some later said they wanted to leave, but found it difficult to do so. Others may have felt they had already gone too far to turn back, and that may have been the most dangerous part. Inside closed environments, fear slowly begins to feel normal. Things that once felt strange begin to feel like rules. Anxiety no longer feels like an individual emotion. Instead, it becomes the atmosphere of the entire group. And inside that atmosphere, people begin moving in narrower and narrower directions. From the outside, Odaeyang still appeared to be a company, but internally, it had already become a closed world of its own. And inside that world, financial pressure began to grow. One of the most important elements of the Odaeyang case was money. At the time, Odaeyang was accused of gathering enormous amounts of funds. The amount was reportedly around 17 billion won. And people began asking where that money had gone. Money can bring people together, but it can also destroy them. Some believed they were making investments. Some thought they were only lending money for a short time. Others believed they would eventually be repaid. But as time passed, the situation grew worse. Pressure from creditors increased, and tension, both inside and outside the organization, continued to rise. Eventually, the problems became public. A violent incident involving creditors drew attention to the company. From that point on, Odaeyang no longer appeared to be an ordinary business. Police also began viewing it very differently. What once looked like a financial dispute now seemed connected to something far more unusual. And people began asking questions. Why had so many people trusted the organization with their money? Where had the money gone? And how was that financial pressure connected to the final tragedy? But the flow of money was never fully explained. What remained were tangled relationships, conflicting claims, and growing confusion. And in the middle of that confusion, Park Sunja and many members suddenly disappeared. As the police investigation began, the situation became even stranger. Park Sunja and many Odaeyang members vanished without warning. Not one or two people, dozens disappeared together. Police began searching for them. Families became anxious. Creditors became furious. And slowly the entire country began focusing on the case. At first, many believed they had gone into hiding. Some assumed they were escaping financial problems. But even after days passed, their location remained unknown. And then the case moved in a far darker direction. The investigation eventually returned to the Odaeyang factory building. From the outside, the building appeared to have already been searched. But inside, there was still one place no one had carefully examined. Above the ceiling, a narrow dark space, a place people normally never entered. And there, the truth was discovered. The missing people had not fled far away. They had remained inside the building the entire time, closer than anyone imagined, in a way no one expected. When the ceiling space was finally opened, everyone at the scene was shocked. Inside, 32 people were found dead. Park Sunja was among them. The space itself was extremely small. It was difficult to imagine so many people remaining there for such a long time. The air was poor, and the environment felt suffocating. And the fact that dozens of people had stayed together inside such a confined space was difficult for many to understand. The scene did not feel like a simple accident, but neither did it resemble a clearly explained crime scene. A narrow space, dozens of people, isolation from the outside world, and silence. That silence became one of the most disturbing parts of the entire case. The victims had not disappeared to some distant place. They had remained inside the very building being investigated. And almost immediately, people began asking questions. Why there? Why together? And why did no one leave that space? From that moment on, the Odaeyang case was no longer seen as only a financial investigation. It became one of the darkest mass death mysteries in Korean history. After the discovery, autopsies and investigations continued. According to official findings, the cause of death involved suffocation. But public doubts did not disappear easily. 32 people, the same confined space, a similar time frame, and very few signs of violent resistance. All of it made the case difficult for many to understand. If someone had forced it, why were there so few signs of struggle? But if it had truly been a collective decision, How had so many people accepted the same outcome? Neither question was easy to answer. There were also reports that handwritten notes had been found at the scene, and afterward, different interpretations emerged. Some viewed the notes as evidence of a final decision. Others questioned whether pressure or control may have existed inside the group. But unconfirmed claims must always be handled carefully. What remained clear was that public suspicion continued long after the official investigation ended. A conclusion existed, but acceptance never fully followed. And within that gap, the Odaeyang case remained a lingering mystery. Another issue that continued drawing attention was the missing money. Where had the 17 billion won gone? Who had controlled it? And what happened to it after the deaths? Those questions remained controversial for many years. During that process, allegations involving a specific religious organization also began to surface. Some claimed that Odaeyang funds had been connected to outside groups. Others argued that such claims had never been clearly proven. This part of the case must be approached carefully. Real people and real organizations were involved, and unverified claims cannot be treated as fact. What mattered was that those suspicions continued shaping public perception of the case. To many people, the missing money seemed like the key to understanding the tragedy. But that key never fully unlocked the truth. The financial questions remained complex, and opinions remained divided. And over time, the case itself grew even darker. Money, control, belief, fear, and unresolved suspicion. All of it became intertwined inside the Odaeyang case. Years later, the Odaeyang case returned to public attention. In 1991, new testimonies and voluntary statements led to a reinvestigation. Investigators attempted to reconstruct the final events. Who played what role? What happened during the final hours? And how the deaths occurred. After the reinvestigation, the case was officially concluded as a collective act of suicide. But even that conclusion failed to convince everyone. The structure of the case itself felt deeply disturbing. Too many people inside one confined space, a location far too narrow, and final moments that remained unnervingly quiet. The investigation offered an official explanation, but public memory remained unsettled. The record stated the case was closed, but people continued asking questions. Was everything truly explained? Was there really no outside involvement? Could so many people truly accept the same ending together? Because those questions remained, the Odaeyang case never fully disappeared into the past. And between the official conclusion and the discomfort people continued to feel, the case remained one of the darkest chapters in modern Korean history. The Odaeyang case is remembered for more than the number of victims. People still struggle to understand the final scene itself. Why were they above the factory ceiling? Why were so many people gathered in the same place? Why did no one escape? And why was the scene so unnervingly quiet? Those questions have never fully disappeared. Official conclusions exist, but some cases do not end with documents alone. The Odaeyang case became a warning about collective psychology, how dangerous closed communities can become, how financial pressure and blind belief can slowly consume people, and how the influence of a single figure can reshape an entire group. This was not a ghost story. It truly happened. And that is what makes it frightening. not because of spirits, but because of the silence people created themselves. And even now, that silence still lingers over one of the darkest chapters in modern Korean history. More than 30 years have passed. The Odaeyang case was officially closed. But even now, some people still believe the truth remains hidden inside that ceiling space. Was it a tragedy created by blind belief? Or was it something deeper, where money, control, and unresolved suspicion became impossible to separate? One fact remains certain. That day, 32 people were found inside the ceiling space of a factory building in Yongin, South Korea. And the country has never fully forgotten that silent tragedy. A closed space, missing money, lingering suspicion, and silence that was never fully explained. This was the Odaeyang mass death incident.
This story ends here. But in the darkness, stories remain. Will you stay for the next one? Dark Case Hub.